So hello and a very warm welcome to this Ten2Two webinar on how to get the right mindset for your job search. I'm Tracey Adams, a director at Ten2Two. So for those who don't know us, Ten2Two specialises in recruitment for part-time and flexible roles. So if you're looking for a new job, please register via our website. And tonight, we're delighted to welcome Debbie Denyer from Coach the Difference. Debbie is a qualified executive coach who spent over 14 years in senior leadership roles, supporting people through change. So hello, Debbie, good evening, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Definitely.
So just some practicals before we jump in. We've scheduled 40 minutes for the webinar, including questions. If you've got any questions, please use the Q&A box on the bottom on your screen, and I'll do my best to keep up. If we've got lots of questions and we don't get around to answering, we'll answer these offline after the event. And just to point out, the Q&A box is confidential and anonymous, so please feel free to put whatever you like in there, and no one else can see what you write. So it might be helpful if you have a pen and paper to hand, but we will also be sending out a workbook after the event to remind you of the content, and there will also be a recording, so you don't need to scribble copious notes. So this webinar is all about mindset when job searching rather than the practicals. However, we'll be running a webinar on the practicals of job searching in the next few months, so keep an eye out for that. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Debbie, and I'm now going to duck out Debbie and make you the main focus.
Thank you. Right, okay, hello everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. So here we go. Okay, so as we said, I'm Debbie Denyer. I'm an executive coach from Coach the Difference, and this is about managing your job search mindset. So we're going to talk about what your mindset is and how to manage it, building motivation and increasing your resilience. So what is mindset, first of all? So your mindset is a set of beliefs that shape how you make sense of the world and yourself. And it influences how you think, feel and behave in any given situation. So what I want you to do for me is finish this sentence. So the job search journey is. So how do you feel about the job search journey? So if you could drop into the Q&A how you would finish that sentence. So the job search journey is. And whilst you're doing that, I'm just going to move on to the next slide quickly. Okay, so we're getting some answers coming through, so I'll let you jump in now and give us some of those answers.
Yeah, do you want me to give you a few examples? So hard, painful, daunting, a minefield, frustrating, a nightmare, a full-time job in itself, challenging, depressing, exciting but daunting, another minefield, that's quite a lot, tiring, endless. So I think there's quite a few similarities there.
Yeah, definitely. And they're very common responses. So don't worry. And as you can see from what the answers are, you are not alone. So hopefully I'll be able to help you this evening in terms of helping your kind of mindset around that job search journey. So some of you might have seen before the kind of Kubler-Ross change curve, and this has been kind of adapted in terms of job search. But in terms of this kind of change curve, it shows the kind of the different processes that we go through. And if, for example, you were thinking, relating it to redundancy, you might go through a kind of a stage of denial. You know, this can't be happening to me. How has this happened? This can't be happening to me. You might feel a sense of shock about it. You might even feel anger towards your employer, and that might spill out to people around you, to your friends and your family. This real sense of anger about this situation that you're finding yourself in. There might also be some bargaining. So, you know, if you're in a redundancy situation, it might be that you start bargaining and trying to compromise and, you know, maybe promising things that you can't actually deliver, and trying to, you know, hold on to that situation and not accept it. And then you can transition into this kind of state of depression. You're feeling really low, feeling really flat about the situation. And then you move into a state of understanding, and finally into a state of acceptance. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're happy about the situation, but it means that you accept the situation. And it's at that point that you can be kind of thinking about those new beginnings. So it's worth being aware of this kind of change curve, and you can move backwards and forwards within the change curve. And it takes different people different times to move through the curve, depending on their own personal situation. But just being mindful of that, and mindful of, you know, that's something that happens to people when they go through change, and that, you know, it's okay, it's normal, you're not alone. But I will talk through how you might be able to help yourself move through this change curve a bit quicker. So you mentioned there, somebody said minefield, a couple of people said minefield, and somebody said nightmare. So the words that we use in terms of how we kind of feel about things can actually be a clue for what we might be able to do differently and how we might be able to think differently. So sometimes people say, you know, job search journey, I feel like I'm going around in circles, I'm not getting anywhere, just going around in circles the whole time. I feel like I'm hitting a brick wall, you know, that time where you contact companies and you don't hear back, you apply for jobs and you may even go through the interview stage and you don't hear back, you know, hitting that brick wall, not really getting anywhere. You might feel like, I don't know which direction to turn, you know, it's really overwhelming. You're flitting between looking at one job advert and another job advert and not knowing which to apply for and what to do. And you might feel like you're on an emotional roller coaster. You know, you apply for a role, you get really excited about it, you tailor your CV for it, you start thinking about, yes, I can really see myself here in this role and this would be great for me. And you start to imagine that. And then, you know, you come down the roller coaster because you don't hear back from someone, or you get through to interview and you're back up on the roller coaster, but you're not successful and you come back down again. So it can be this real emotional roller coaster of highs and lows. So what can you do when you're kind of hearing these words that you're using? So for example, if you're going around in circles, take a step back and think about, you know, if I'm going around in circles, I'm doing the same things the whole time. Take a step back from that and think about, what could I be doing differently? Let's stop going around in circles. Let's look at this differently. I was coaching somebody the other day who was talking about the fact that for her, she felt that, you know, she didn't quite know what to do. She was going around in circles, and that the whole job search journey had become so kind of overwhelming and depressing for her that it was meaning that she wasn't spending the time that she needed to on job searching. And so actually we worked on shifting her mindset so that she could see it as more of an exploration and an adventure, rather than this kind of, you know, I'm stuck going around in circles, I can't see a way forward. So that just that shift in mindset can really kind of change the way in which you do your job search journey in the first place. So if you're hitting that brick wall, how can you make some doors in your brick wall? It might be that you're trying to apply to a company and you're not getting anywhere. Then look at LinkedIn, see if you've got any connections that you know who you can reach out to who already work at that organisation. Is there another way through? Or do you have connections who know connections that work at that organisation? Can you contact them and ask them to put you in touch with someone? You know, what are the other options that are available for you, the other routes through? Make some doors in your wall. And if you're feeling like, I don't know which direction to turn, you know, flitting between one option and the next, then it's about identifying, well, what are the priorities here? And so that begins with getting a really good understanding of what you want from a role. You know, what's important to you, what matters to you, what are your strengths, what can you really bring to a role, what are the boundaries and needs that you've got in terms of kind of flexibility, in working hours, in location, you know, what are all of those things that you can create a sort of criteria that you can assess jobs against, so that you're not flitting between one option and the next, and help you prioritise. If you feel like you're on this emotional roller coaster, how can you take the highs and the lows out of that roller coaster. And so it's accepting that there will be highs and lows in the job search journey, but being prepared for those. So thinking about, well, how can I reward myself for, having reached out to X amount of people? How can I reward myself for having got through to an interview? We're so quick to move on to the next thing. We don't celebrate some of those small wins along the way. And it's really important to do that, to kind of recognize what you've achieved and what you've done, and set yourself some targets of, I'm going to contact how many people today. I'm going to, update my CV today, and recognize all those little steps that you're taking along the journey, and thinking about what works for you. So, for you, if actually going out and meeting up with somebody and having a chat through with them and bouncing ideas off with them works for you, then book those kinds of things in. Think about what helps you in terms of your well-being to manage those high points and those low points. Choice. So you don't have control over all the circumstances in your life, but you do have the power to choose how you view them. So to put this into context, I'm going to tell you a bit about my story. So this is my husband, Mark, and my daughter, Chloe. And we'd gone down to Brighton. So he'd cycled from London to Brighton for charity, and we'd gone down to see him. And this was our first weekend away with our baby daughter. And here she's 4 months old in this picture. And it was Father's Day. So she's wearing a best daddy in the world t-shirt as well. So we were really excited, kind of beginning of our journey with her. And it was, it was a lovely day, really lovely day. 4 weeks later, he died. He was 40 years old. By that point, she was about 5 months old. And he died very suddenly from cancer. And at that point, my whole world fell apart. Everything that I'd dreamt of and imagined and we'd talked about suddenly got torn away from me. And so all the kind of first things that we'd imagined, the first steps, the learning to ride a bike, the first boyfriend, which I'm sure he's quite glad that he missed out on. But all of those firsts, all of those things that we've planned to do together and see together were suddenly not an option for us to see together. And my thoughts were, I can't believe he's gone. It's not fair. I had plans for the future. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? And I can't do this. And thinking back to that change curve, I was in shock. I was in denial. I was angry. I was angry with the world. I felt cheated and depressed and overwhelmed. And that meant that I had late nights. I didn't want to go to bed because if I went to bed, I'd wake up and he wouldn't be there. I couldn't be bothered to cook for myself, so I wasn't eating properly. And I wasn't exercising. And I wasn't meeting other people because the only conversation in my head was, my husband's dead and he's not coming back. So I felt like I was in a long, dark tunnel with no light. But I made a very conscious decision that I didn't want to continue to feel like that. And so I decided that I needed to make some windows in my tunnel and find some light. And so for me, that was setting myself a goal. And so I started off with setting myself a goal to do a race, a half marathon in his memory, and raise money for cancer research. And because I set myself this goal, it meant that I started doing some exercise and I started eating healthily because I was doing this training for this race. And I recognized that I needed to see people, that for me, actually, I get my energy from people. And so I needed to arrange to meet up with people and book those things in so that I had something to look forward to ahead of me. So your thoughts affect your feelings, and your feelings affect your actions. So how does this relate to your job search? So you can decide, how do you want to feel about your job search? And then what thoughts do you need to remind yourself of to create that feeling? And what actions do you need to take? And I decided that I didn't want to feel like I was in a tunnel with no light. I wanted to feel grateful for what I had, for the time that I'd had with him, for the memories that I had, and for my beautiful baby daughter that really needed me. And so I wanted to feel happy. I wanted to feel grateful. And so then it was, well, how can I feel like that? What thoughts do I need to be having? And what actions do I need to take? And you can do the same in terms of your job search. So self-awareness. We all have beliefs. And I said at the start that your mindset is beliefs that you've built up. And what we do is we find data, we find information to back those beliefs up. And so we observe data and experiences, and we select from that things that back up that belief, and we add meanings to it, and we make assumptions based on those meanings. And then we draw conclusions from them and adopt other beliefs about the world. And then we take action based on those beliefs. So in terms of a job, it might be that, you know, the fact of the situation was that you went for an interview and you didn't get the job. But then what you might start doing is thinking, oh, well, you know, I noticed that interviewer didn't nod and smile when I was talking. And so that means that they didn't think that I was good enough or experienced enough. And I assume that the other candidate must have been more experienced. And everyone else applying for these roles has X years of experience and X qualifications. And so I don't believe that there's any point in me applying for this type of role. And so then you stop applying for roles. So you go through this, selecting the data that backs up that belief, and it just keeps adding to that belief. So my question to you is, what are you assuming that is holding you back from your goal? So if you just put into the Q&A again, what are you assuming that is holding you back from your goal?
There we go. I'm starting to get some responses. So I'm too young and too inexperienced, confidence, lack of confidence, age, lack of self-belief, that I don't have the right experience or the relevant experience, that other people will be picked over me, the fear of the unknown. What else have we got? Too old again. Assuming everybody else will be more experienced. I've been out of the job market for too long. Family commitments.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some common themes.
Yeah. And again, you can see from this that you're not alone in thinking like that. And so what we can do with the ladder of influence is to go back through the ladder and think about, well, those beliefs that you've got, those assumptions that you're making, are they based on evidence? Are they based on facts? Or have you, made assumptions and drawn conclusions from situations? So kind of work it back through and think about, well, is that true? Is that really true? What data have I got that tells me whether or not that's true? What evidence have I got? And actually quite often you can unpick it and think, well, I don't know, maybe, you know, I need to go out and find out whether that is true. Or maybe I've made an assumption, or maybe this experience that I've had in the past has made me feel like that, but that might not be the experience that I might have in the future. So working back through and really thinking through, you know, what are those meanings that you've added to things. One thing that you can do as well in terms of mindset is think about kind of the worst case scenario. So what your brain does is it's constantly scanning for threats. And so, you know, you going for an interview, there was somebody who said fear of failure there. So going for an interview and you're constantly kind of having to put yourself out of your comfort zone and, you know, go and present your, you know, about you in front of other people. And so, you know, that can be really nerve-wracking, that can be really scary. And so your brain is trying to keep you safe. Your brain is kind of thinking, well, this is a threat, this is scary, and it's trying to keep you safe. And you can go into the fight, flight, or freeze mode. And so, you know, the kind of tongue-tied, not knowing what to say. You can think, well, I'm not even going to apply for that job. I'm going to pull out the interview process. So all of those kind of things can be happening to you. And so sometimes it's worth kind of thinking through, well, what is the worst case scenario? So if I go for this interview and I don't get the job, what would I do then? And okay, so I would then, you know, think about maybe what I've learned from it, what I can take from it, how I can maybe build on that for the next time. Or, you know, if I don't get this job, what can I do then? Well, I can apply for another job, or I can, you know, speak to somebody else and see whether there's other opportunities there, or I can ask them to keep my CV on file for the future. You know, going through and saying, what would I do then? What then? What then? What then? And kind of work through those scenarios. And think about, well, if you did nothing, if you don't apply for any jobs, if you stay in this kind of letting your brain search out threats the whole time, then you're not going to get a job. If you don't do anything at all, you won't get a job. So, you know, working through those different scenarios. So there's some other things that we can do in terms of supporting ourselves to have a healthy mind. So there's a range of different factors, and you will get one of these worksheets sent out to you. But if you've got a pen and paper, you can scribble this out now and just give it a go. So if you draw a wheel like this with some spokes, and you mark those spokes from the middle, so the outside is 10, the middle is 0. Then what you do is you put different factors into the wheel. So these different factors have been shown by the neuropsychiatrist, neuropsychiatrist Dan Siegel, to you know, be helpful in terms of having a healthy mind. So connecting at the top. So we all know from COVID and lockdown the impact of not being able to connect with other people had on us. So making time for connection as part of your kind of job search journey. The little cloud is time in, so having time for reflection and taking that time to think and stop and reflect for a while, rather than that going around in circles or going off in lots of different directions. You know, taking a bit of time to think and reflect and really get clear on you and what value you can bring, what experiences you've got, what strengths you've got. Playtime, so laughing. We are notoriously bad as adults. We know how to have fun when we're children, and we kind of forget as we get older. So having time to laugh and have fun. Nutrition, we all know how good nutrition has an impact on your health, your mental health. Physical time, so I mean, this doesn't have to be going to the gym. It can be doing the hoovering, or it could be, you know, going for a walk around the block. And if you're going through the sort of job searching every day and you're just sat in front of your computer job searching, it can be helpful to just, you know, take that break, maybe kind of see it as the morning commute and the afternoon commute, and do a walk around the block before the start of the day and a walk around the block at the end of the day. And it just helps your brain to kind of say, okay, well, that's the day finished, I can now relax. Having some downtime where you don't do anything. You know, how many of us now, even in our downtime, we're there on our phones scrolling. So we don't allow our brains that time to just be and just settle. And the part of your brain, that the prefrontal cortex, that does all of the kind of logical thinking and is kind of the boss of your brain, is very energy heavy. And so it needs that downtime. It needs that time to relax. And we all know from, you know, when we're just busy the whole time, that, you know, it can feel like your brain hurts. And so making sure that you have that downtime. Sleep. We all know that sleep deprivation, those of you who've got children and have been through sleep deprivation, can really affect your mood and your ability to think clearly and your confidence. You know, when you've not had any sleep and you're just shattered, then, you know, it really starts to kind of chip away at your confidence. And then focus time. So the brain isn't very good at switching between lots of tasks. So although we can have multiple tabs open on our computer, and we can switch between, you know, emails and phone messages and all the different things that we're doing at once, it's much better to be really focused and to think about, well, when is my energy at the highest, at which point in the day? What are the kinds of activities that I'm best at doing when my energy is highest? What are the kinds of activities that I'm better doing when I'm having a bit of a lull? And breaking your day up into kind of blocks of those activities so that you're not having to chop and change. Because every time you move from one thing to another, your brain then has to go, oh, hold on a minute, where was I on this? And kind of get back up to speed again. So just try and focus on, maybe it's making phone calls to recruiters at this time of day. Maybe it's following up on job applications at this time of day, and kind of blocking those things together. So once you've drawn your wheel and you've got your different elements within it, then what you do is you plot where you are now on a scale of 1 to 10 for each of those different activities. So you can think about, you know, over the space of a week or over the space of a month, you know, how much time are you dedicating to maybe having fun, having a laugh, you know? So you might rate that at 4 out of 10. And you do that for each of those different activities. And then what you do is you plot where you'd like to be. And obviously in an ideal world we'd be equal on all of them, but that's not necessarily possible. So it's about thinking, you know, which ones do I want to kind of focus on the most? And some of those might be, actually, I'm doing okay on that. I'm quite happy with that. So which ones would you like to focus on the most? And you plot that round as well. And then what you do is you reflect on, you know, one small step that might help you to get to where you want to be. So, for example, it might be that, you know, sleeping. I need to get better at sleeping. I'm terrible for looking at my phone late at night. I go up to put my phone by the bed and charge it, and I check my phone, see what's happening the next day, and then the next thing I know, I've, you know, lost an hour scrolling endlessly, and I'm going to bed tired, and then that affects me the next day. So it might be that for me, well, one small step is I could plug my phone in downstairs and use my alarm clock that I have that I never use, and so I don't need my phone to be by my bed. So that could be one small step. So just thinking about one small step that you could do. And the other question that's worth asking yourself is, what's good enough for today? So as we heard at the start, the job search journey is hard, it is tough, and it can be these real ups and downs. And so just being kind to yourself and recognizing that there are going to be days that are really tough, and just be a bit kind to yourself on those days and think about, well, what's good enough for today? And this is something that I did after my husband died. You know, there were days that were really tough. And so it was, you know, what's good enough for today? So in summary, our words that we're using, so nightmare, minefield, you know, those words give us a bit of a hint in terms of, well, how can we turn that around? How can we think about that a bit differently? So, you know, how can you turn the minefield, remove some of those mines? What could you be doing? The nightmare, how could you turn that into a dream? Thoughts affect your feelings, feelings affect your actions. So reframe them. How do you want to feel about your job search? What thoughts do you need to have, and what actions do you need to take? And then self-awareness, that ladder of inference, making sure that those assumptions you've got, work back through. What's the evidence? Is that really true? And then your healthy mind, making sure that you protect yourself. So thank you. You are more than welcome to link up with me on LinkedIn, or email me if you want any more information. And as we said, we'll send out a workbook to you as well. So thank you, everybody.
Brilliant. Thank you, Debbie. That's great. So we've got a little bit of time. We've got about 5 minutes. Are you happy to take some questions if anybody's got some questions in the chat? So if anybody has got anything they particularly want to ask now, Debbie's got time, so please do. I just got one early question that I'll just jump in with quickly. So someone said, on the wheel, could you just please remind us what time in is? Time
in, okay. Right, let me just go back to the wheel a second. Okay, so this was time in here. So this was the reflecting. So that can be, you know, journaling is one way of reflecting, you know, just scribbling down your thoughts. So particularly if you've had an interview and you've come out of that interview and you think, oh, that didn't go as well as I wanted it to. Sometimes just getting those thoughts down and journaling them down can be really helpful. You don't have to even read it again, but just getting them out, getting them down can be helpful. Or kind of reflecting in terms of thinking, well, what went well? What could have gone even better? You know, what can I do differently next time? So reflecting on those experiences, and then also thinking about reflecting before you go into an interview. You might reflect and think, you know, is there a time in the past where I felt really confident? And what was I doing at that time? You know, what skills and strengths was I using at that point in time? So that kind of thing. So just reflecting, time in is reflecting, really, and kind of thinking through things.
That's perfect. Thank you. We haven't had any other questions, but we have had some lovely comments back. You know, people saying it resonates with them as well, and they sort of can resonate with that. So that's brilliant. So I think if there's no other questions, as Debbie had said, you know, we're going to follow up. So we'll follow up with the workbook. I'm just going to sort of change the screen so I'm back on. Hang on a second. There we go. So we're back to normal. So we'll follow up with the workbook and the answers to any questions. If anybody pops anything up now, we can answer those afterwards as well. The recording usually takes a day or two to come out, but we'll let you know when it's ready. And I think all that's left for me to say is thank you very much, everybody, for all your comments. We've had lots and lots of comments and participation, so thank you. And thank you for Debbie. Thanks for your time this evening and for sharing all of that with us and for joining us. So thanks very much.
Thank you. You're more than welcome.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.